Hey, welcome everybody to Spirituality Adventures. We're glad you're tuning into this episode. We are a viewer and listener supported podcast, so we really appreciate you listening, watching on YouTube. We really encourage you to subscribe to whatever platform you're using. If you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, or if you're on Apple or however you listen to a podcast, be sure and subscribe. We greatly appreciate it. Also, make comments if you like it and share it if you like it. We really need people to make comments and share the episodes that you like. And then also, if you're not already a supporter, we really would encourage you to go to spiritualityadventures.com and you can pick a tier, and we have bonus content for every type of giver. This is a nonprofit, so they're tax-deductible donations, but we do provide bonus content for those who are supporters. So be a part of the team, help support Spirituality Adventures, and we're so glad you're tuning into this episode. Hey folks, thanks for tuning into this episode of Spirituality Adventures. So glad that you're here today. I'm excited to interview Steve Watson. He is the pastor at Reservoir Church, which, by the way, was started by a friend of mine, Dave Schmelzer. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. He was our founding senior pastor on our start team back in the mid-90s.
As a vineyard church, I started a vineyard church in Kansas City in 1990. And Dave and I can remember being in multiple conferences with Dave, and even a year or two ago, talked with Dave on the phone. I think he's out in LA now. So anyway, but Reservoir Church ended up leaving the vineyard, I think largely over the LGBTQ plus issue. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's right. There were like 15 churches that quit or got kicked out, all like 2014, 2015, as kind of vineyard got a little more doggedly anti-LGBTQ, and some of us were wanting our own freedom of conscience and practice. So
Yep. So, but give us a little of your background, Steve. Thanks for being on the podcast. And I'd love to hear, kind of like where you grew up. Did you grow up in a faith-oriented family? And how do you go from, growing up to being a pastor of a progressive, post-evangelical, post-colonial church?
Sure thing, Fred. Hey, first of all, thanks for having me on the podcast. It was fun to finally meet you face to face, I think, last year, and to connect around this work that we're both doing. I guess first off, I'm a lifelong homer. I'm a Eastern Mass, Boston, impolitely we're called by outsiders massholes, this kind of local Eastern Mass guy. So that's kind of never left home. Broadly speaking, love my city. Massachusetts, Eastern Mass we were kind of on the religiously, on the forefront of the rise of the nuns in America. A lot of people, especially from outside the region, considered us one of the least Christian, least religious kind of areas of the country, which I think is probably a fair, not fair perspective, but it's certainly an area with a lot of spiritual religious roots that, the number of people that don't identify with, or at least don't practice any particular religious faith is that's more the norm than otherwise, and has been in many ways since I was a kid, even in the 70s and 80s. I kind of grew up in a not super devout, but Christian family whose parents had gone actually to Christian college and moved up to Massachusetts from New York City area for that, but kind of toned down their faith by the time I was a kid. As a teenager, I got into Jesus and church, largely because I was lonely. I'd had some childhood trauma, and was kind of exposed to the faith in a little deeper way, in ways that felt really meaningful to me to imagine and believe that a really good God loved me and was interested in who I was and what I had to say, and was introduced to a community of people around that faith that were really warm and generous and smart and kind. So I kind of got enfolded in the faith in a deeper way as a teenager. I was an artist too, a classical singer, and didn't have a real practical career path, and was involved in an evangelical campus ministry. And so they kind of snatched me up, guy who's really into the faith, knows his Bible, knows how to lead a group of people, and doesn't have fixed career plans. I was a campus missionary before you knew it, with with an evangelical, I would say for the 90s, a relatively, we wouldn't use that word, but kind of progressive, centrist evangelical student ministry. And did that for a few years with InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, but kind of wasn't attracted, was going to enrolled in a kind of conservative Calvinist white seminary whose theology and culture didn't register with me.
What was the college, or what was the college you went to?
I actually went to Brandeis, a liberal arts, mostly Jewish college in Greater Boston, where I met my wife, and we were leading a tiny little kind of multi-ethnic student Christian fellowship at this mostly Jewish campus.
Interesting.
And then kind of worked at schools in the Boston area and Western Mass, where some liberal art colleges, Massachusetts big state school, but kind of wasn't attracted to, didn't have a vision for like a kind of career in Christian ministry. And so after some kind of bouncing around trying to figure out what to do, I became a public school teacher. I was a middle and high school English teacher, became a high school principal in a public urban environment in Massachusetts, and kind of had this vision for my life of like having a ministry like in a secular environment with teens and in the public schools, and that I would, give them my background and skills, just kind of help out in church whoever I could. So my wife and I led like groups at church, and I tended to be like a backup preacher, just given having the experience I had. And then the church my family was involved with, which was then called Greater Boston Vineyard, now Reservoir Church, was going through a set of big transitions. First ever senior pastor kind of leadership transition. The community was in a bit of a complex sort of dispute tension about how inclusive we would be around the LGBTQ community and where the future of the church was going, and leadership succession kind of wasn't working out. And then a group of people like rallied around me to try to convince me to apply to be the second senior pastor of the church. I said, absolutely not. I said, I don't want the job, and you can find someone better. And they were like, well, could you just pray about it? I was like, sure, I'll pray about it. And, a couple months later I was open. So it was like, my like call to the pastorate was like a literal call. It was like a phone call from someone, be like, will you do this? I was like, no. But a few months later I did it. I was, I have ADHD. I'm a little impulsive, and I love my church. And I felt like the high school would probably find another principal, but we didn't have the phrase post-evangelical yet, but these churches that had this kind of like deep spiritual vibrancy and love for Jesus and some of the features of kind of contemporary evangelicalism, but we're looking for more science-informed, more inclusive, more justice-oriented futures for ourselves. It really there weren't like a million people stepping up to lead those churches at the time. And I just kind of had a bug that like, maybe this is like a thing God wants me to do. So that was 2013. Yeah. St. Patrick's Day is my official like anniversary of my call to the pastorates, when they literally like said, gave me the offer and I had to sign something. So 13 years ago.
Yeah. Wow.
So I've stuck with it. Yeah.
Interesting. So, so how in the world did you go to seminary?
I dropped out of an MDiv program in my 20s. It was like a white, reformed, conservative, kind of Calvinist leading seminary. And
which one?
They taught me well that was not the theology and structure of my faith. No offense.
Was that Gordon Conwell?
It was Gordon Conwell. Yeah. No particular shade on them other than the inherent shade on some of the theology that they teach. But it's just, but yeah, my late 20s, I kind of dropped out of that program halfway through. And then all my kind of formal training, graduate work was like an educational leadership. So yeah, I was a little under-credentialed when I got called to be a senior pastor 13 years ago. So we're the new book that you've just put out, and you've completed your doctoral program. Tom Ward, one of our friends, was amazing guy.
Yeah, I love Tom. He's been a blessing in my life for sure. Yeah. All Flesh Shalom. Yeah. Subtitle: Larger, Freer, More Loving Readings of the Good News of Jesus.
Yeah.
But you could add some more subtitles: Post-Colonial Constructive Theology. And so I kind of want to hear in this. I thought, like, man, you bit off a lot in this book.
Sure did.
Oh my God.
A little too much.
Gee, many Christmas. Like,
I was a horrible doctoral student.
I mean, what a breadth of
everything you could do to make it harder to finish.
Yeah,
I did
exactly. But no, it's great content. But I'm just curious, how did an InterVarsity guy who was in a sort of a charismatic, non-denominational vineyard type church, all of a sudden come out with a book on post-colonial constructive theology. What's the short? What started influencing your theology?
Yeah.
Did that influence happen after you started pastoring? When you
And
came
a lot of answers to that question. A lot of answers to that question.
like, was it a slow evolution or a fast evolution? Were you?
Yeah, slow. I remember being 19, growing up in an all-white community, being by that point like a devout follower of Jesus, and being asked by a friend in my little multiracial like campus student fellowship, being asked like very kind of innocently, like, "Hey, Steve, like, just a question I've been curious to ask someone. Like, do you ever feel bad for all the things your people have done?" And I remember hearing that question and being like, "What in the world does that question mean?" Because first off, I was like, I don't have a people. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I grew up being white, just being like, I'm kind of like, I mean, this stuff, like, it offends me now. It's just honest to my younger self. Just being like, I'm normal. Like, I don't have a culture. I'm just like American, right? I'm like a normal person. But the idea of like, I have a people and I have ancestors and I have a culture, and it might be a mixed bag. There might be things that like we've, as a people, accomplished in the world to be proud of, and things that have been like, so in many ways, like I could begin the story back there,
Okay.
like the dawning of a racial identity, and be like, I've been kind of curious for 35 years, Fred, like working in multiracial schools, pastor of multiracial church, father and husband of multiracial families. Like I have this long curiosity of like, what is it that my ancestors have put out into the world that has shaped me in ways that I celebrate and I'm proud of? I mean, I still sing in a Renaissance choir, singing old European music. And what are ways that as a colonial force in the world the past 500 years, we've kind of like caused a lot of damage, like globally? And how's that story tied to my religion? So it's kind of an old story there that I think is probably where this work starts, like 35 years ago. There's other answers to that question that are more recent, but that would be like the slow burning story, like a real curiosity around where race and culture and religion are just always intertwined, because our human experience is always intertwined with religion, and just kind of a curiosity about what impact that's have and what to do about that. So that's one answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I grew up Southern Baptist, got sent to the Southern Baptist youth camp, went to Baylor and Southwestern Seminary. And, the colonial missionaries are the heroes of the faith.
Yeah.
Especially the ones that gave their life for the gospel in faraway places.
Yeah.
And, I never even reflected on white supremacy or how, I mean, by the time I got to Baylor and Southwestern, they were really tried to subdue their support of of racism and slavery and their history, and and so it was a very white evangelical patriarchal world that I was raised in. It was the air I breathed. I had Black friends who were athletes, and I was kind of loved them, and I didn't think about how their experience in America as a Black American was different than mine. I remember I started a D-Min program at Fuller, studying with missiology, Wagner and Ralph Winter and those guys, and I remember reading the Poisonwood Bible, by Barbara Kingslover, and that was all in the 90s. And all of that, when I read the Poisonwood Bible, I was like, like that was the first time the light bulb went on that the total impact of white missionaries in foreign places wasn't always good. So those were just my early sort of shifts that began to get me rethinking things.
It's funny, for whatever reason, I just feel like this curiosity around this thing has just kind of always been there. One of the reasons I almost didn't become a pastor was when I was like a backup preacher on the teaching team at the church I'm now a senior pastor of. We used to collaborate on sermon writing, and one of the pastors used to talk about Billy Graham, like kind of winsomely, as like a warm example of some of the better things in evangelicalism. And like, I actually understand his point. Like, Billy Graham's a large figure, many beautiful parts of his legacy, especially compared to some of our evangelical leaders today. And But I remember I was unwilling to celebrate that because I said, Billy Graham sat on the sidelines, the whole civil rights movement. He like only engaged in the most trivial symbolic kind of condemning the man to like judgment or hell or anything like that. But like, I can't uphold him as a image of like a kind of Christian hero. And the guy, the person at the time I was in an argument with kind of decided, oh, this is why Steve is like an urban educator, because his passions on this are so high, and why he doesn't want to be a pastor. Like, who knew? Like, I'm a pastor now, but yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah. So let's do some definitions real quick first on the book.
Sure thing.
Let's start with the title first, and then let's go to these two words, post-colonial constructive theology. Yeah. But first, all flesh, and then give us your reason for the title and your definition of all flesh and your definition of shalom.
Yeah. I mean, the all flesh shalom. So like, I had actually written parts of this book in some kind of early drafts of chapters for a doctoral dissertation, and the chapters were all like kind of rando. They were very like separate, didn't connect. And Tom, my advisor, said, Steve, like, what's the thing you're trying to say? Like, I need you to like invent a phrase that captures it. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm trying to say. I'm just like writing about whatever interests me. Like, and I really was, interested in like process and open and relational theologians, which we can talk about later, and post-colonial kind of like BIPOC liberation theologians, and like what together they would have to say about like the good news of Jesus. And I was writing about all random things. And he was like, you need a phrase, you need like an anchor, like what holds your thinking together. And I didn't get that title first. I got like a list of 5, if I can remember them. I was like, I'm interested in why the spirituality and theology I was raised in, like the kind of Protestant and Catholic white Christian legacy, has tended to be so patriarchal, kind of like male dominated, like hierarchical, like or sort of certain ways that thought about what it meant to be powerful people and these kind of aloof, powerful leaders, disembodied, like about the soul and not the holistic human experience, and kind of otherworldly, like with afterlife and something else. There's a 5th anyway. And I was like, what is the opposite of all those things? Like, what's the opposite? And I was like, the all flesh was, kind of comes out of some lines in the New Testament that interpret the incarnation, like the kind of presence of God in Jesus, like most expansively. To be like, what if Jesus is sort of like a centerpiece of God's incarnational life, not like the only example, that God's like radically connected to like the human story and like actually all material reality. And all flesh is kind of a phrase to capture that like the most limited Christian imagination is like, oh, God is invested in essentially the afterlife of baptized Christians, right? That's like this really narrow. And it's like, what if just the opposite is true? Like God is just super invested, super present to like all created reality. So all humanity and all flesh was sort of a poetic way of capturing that. Like, it's not just people even. So like there's a blue heron, beautiful picture that Tom took, actually. It's our mutual friend, doctoral advisor.
Namesake on there,
Yeah, and it's like
name is Heron. Though double R herons are Irish, and single R herons are birds. So anyway,
secretly dedicated to you, Fred. This thing. So that's where all flesh comes from. Like, I want a faith that is good news for all material reality. Like even the parents, even the Muslims, even the aliens, even like the fields, the oceans. So, and shalom is just an old Hebrew word that means like, it's a much more expansive definition of peace. So it means something like, if you take the words like justice and peace and well-being and healing and wholeness and kind of mash that all together, I think that's more or less what shalom means.
Yeah.
And so this idea that like God's sort of interest, and certainly the interest that expressed in the good news of Jesus for again, all flesh, not just Christians, not even just people, is to be experiencers of and bringers of shalom, to be participants in God's vision of kind of growing this experience of healness, wholeness, justice, well-being, like for all creatures everywhere for all time. I think a loving God, I think that's like kind of God's telos, his interest, his point, like what God's kind of interested in. And so that's where the title All Flesh Shalom is kind of a mashup of the two big things that I think are going on in the story.
I like that. That. So then in your intro, you talk about post-colonial theology. You talk about constructive theology. Obviously, there's some backdrops even to those two.
Yeah.
And I'm curious as well about how you see post-colonial theology as it might relate to liberation theology and other types of theologies that come from the margins, like, feminist theology and those kind of things.
Yeah. Yeah, I use the word post-colonial. I think there's different. I don't, in the book, mainly use the phrase like liberation theology, but I think sometimes these are catchphrases for each other. For me, post-colonial is just a way of acknowledging, like, I'm not an expert on one particular community's like liberation theology, like outside the dominant white construct, but I'm by identity, I mean, like I'm a white Christian Northern European heritage. So by identity, like I have a colonial legacy, like my ancestors, right?
Yeah.
But I'm interested in the thinking and the experience of communities that were learning to like follow Jesus, participate in faith, and do theology that would both be different from and in resistance to the kind of white dominant legacy they encountered. And so in the book, there's a lot of Black theology and womanist theology, which is a particularly kind of feminist expression of Black theology. There's kind of Korean and other Asian and Asian American theology. There's indigenous theology. And so post-colonial is basically a way of just acknowledging that like there's a lot of people whose introduction to Christianity kind of started with kind of a white colonizer's legacy in America or elsewhere, but they learned to think and pray and do faith in resistance to, and in some ways kind of outside that expression of Christianity. And I feel like, given what white Christianity has made of the religion and made of the world in some ways, it's like, oh, let's like, sit at the feet of either our own people or someone else's people who have been kind of like living and practicing this faith, looking for a different way and correcting so many of the blind spots and problems of dominant Christianity. So yeah, that post-colonial is just a way to say like, I wanted lots and lots, as many possible kind of thinkers and people in the way of Jesus as possible to kind of work with together and see what common strands they have to say.
Yeah, I love the way you included a diverse community of theologians. So yeah, I'm curious. Oh, by the way, I love that you included Randy Woodley.
Yeah.
Am I saying his name correctly?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I don't know him. I've never met him, but I actually knew Richard Twiss.
Okay, yeah.
And I used to go to the National Prayer Breakfast for years, and I worked with a guy named Carl Medeiros on the Middle East Suite.
Oh yeah, sure.
So we hosted, lots of Muslims from the Middle East, and I did that for over a decade with Carl.
Yeah.
And but Richard started coming into the mix a little bit, and in fact, he died from a heart attack at the National Prayer Breakfast. I was there. He had a heart attack in the elevator, and I had just talked to him before he passed away. This is an indigenous movement of thinkers around Jesus, but then incorporating indigenous thought into
I mean, I'm not no expert on this, but I came into Randy's work because I loved as along with Richard and others, like a pathfinder in this sort of kind of reaction against the early like indigenous churches, which were told like their own culture and practices were like God, at best God was like disinterested in them, and at worst they were like demonic or something, and they had to become white people to become Christian essentially. And I know Randy has been such a leader in saying actually like indigenous wisdom in many ways like aligns with the way of Jesus in deeper and more powerful ways than a lot of what Christianity's become. And so Randy's work was, one of the guiding lights in the work. And we don't have like a deep personal friendship, but he ended up on my dissertation committee as a result, and a kind of a mentor in that process. And this book's actually a reparations project as well, because it's a work of like open and relational process theology, but that really depends on the wisdom of BIPOC post-colonial theologians. I just felt like as a white author, like, I mean, theology books don't sell a lot, so I was never going to get rich off this or anything. But I was like, I don't think it makes sense for me to make $1 off this, because I think white people who are finding different ways to use and express the wisdom of BIPOC folks, in this case, BIPOC theologians, like we owe a debt of repair, to and so anyway, all the any proceeds from this book actually go toward Randy and his wife Edith's kind of beautiful Indigenous Learning Center out in what we call now Oregon now, because I just think they're doing such holy work and want them to benefit in some way through this project.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for those who aren't super theological, because we have a broad set of listeners.
Yeah.
Let's just real quickly talk about what's the worst manifestations of this white colonialism that was tied to the church, right? Because the church kind of, piggybacked or actually provided the theological construct, even not just piggyback, but could even been the theological impetus for some of these worst manifestations of Christianity in the world. It seems like to me, like the things that are called Christian, but that the opposite of Jesus, but that have really been a symbol of white colonial, dominance in the world. What are some of the worst manifestations of that, and why? And I mean, because you summarize them really quickly. You go, in one sentence, you'll go bam, 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 and and then why should we listen? We white guys are talking right now. Why should we listen to voices from the margin?
Yeah.
I mean, voices.
I'll give you a historical and a contemporary. Like, I just think as at the beginning of what I learned as a kid in social studies called like the age of exploration, right? It's kind of like white people out discovering the world, going finding themselves and everyone else apparently. The Pope like gave authorization to the new colonialists to conquer all those lands, including to enslave its people in the name of Jesus. So it's like actually like formal church teaching. And it wasn't a new idea, because all they were doing is they were taking constructs they had developed over centuries in their kind of battles with Islam and their kind of ancient version of Islamophobia. And all that was predicated upon the early church's anti-Semitism, like its rejection of its Jewish roots. And so the church in Europe had just centuries, almost 2 millennia of practice of kind of thinking of itself as God's people and defining itself over and against the world and thinking God lives with us. And our project is to convert the rest of the world in the name of our God. And if we can't convert them, we have every right to kind of subjugate, enslave, and steal from them, because they're on their way to hell anyway. Like, if you view people as subjects of God's wrath, it's one tiny step further to make them subjects of your wrath, right? So there's like a super old historical story here.
Say that line again.
If you like, I mean, there's so much here. Like, my whole chapter on the cross and stuff, this becomes very relevant. But if you view people as subjects of God's wrath, like if they don't convert, God hates them, is angry with them, they might be on their way to hell. It's like a small step further to make them subjects of your wrath. Like, if someone's on the way to hell, like, why bother protecting their land or dignity or not stealing their stuff, right? So I think there's centuries of this. For me, what resonated though in the more near term were kind of two things. I was thinking about, like, why is it that so many white guys like myself have kind of like aloof father figures in our history? And I was interested in, like, what does Jesus's Abba look like? And there's the second chapter of this book is all about, like, kind of what is the nature of Abba? What did Jesus teach about God? And how's that different from this kind of distant, patriarchal, angry, distant kind of father figure that's the subject of so much kind of Western Christianity? So that was I was interested in that because of my own spiritual needs and my own, like, family lineage and life story. And then at the same time, I was just like watching what was happening in 2021 in the world. Like, January 6th was like this profoundly Christian nationalist influence kind of moment. And there's all this kind of Christian imagery amongst all the dudes trying to, like, take back America for Trump and for their own, like, kind of weirdly violent, narrow vision of Christianity. That same year, kind of troubled, baptized white young guy from the South, like, shot up a bunch of Asian and Asian American workers in massage parlors in in Georgia. And in that same year, there was like some major unearthing of remains from indigenous kids that had like died of starvation, mistreatment, and stuff like that. And all these Christian-funded schools in North America that have been designed to kind of like convert and assimilate indigenous kids while stealing them from their families. Like 2021, like all this was like fresh news. They're like, and a lot of white Christians and white evangelicals were acting like somehow these were people that hadn't quite got the message full enough. Like they were kind of like misdiscipled, or they weren't like true Christians. And I'm like, what if actually, maybe that's part of the story, but like, what if actually these kind of events are like a feature, not a bug, of parts of the white Christian lineage? Like what if actually there's some core theological messaging that is actually helping to create these kind of some of this like horrible violence that we're familiar with. And in time, like a quote from James Baldwin became kind of a guiding light for me, enough so that it makes it in the subtitle. Yeah, I mean, Baldwin said in the 60s, in the context of like, white people interviewing him of like, why are black people like trying to get so much change so fast? Why are you so radical? All these like white religious and non-religious like bystanders or even obstructors of the civil rights movement, would challenge him and stuff. And at one point, Baldwin has this great quote in The Fire Next Time where he says, if your concept of God doesn't make, if our concept of God doesn't make us larger, freer, and more loving, then it's time we got rid of him.
Right.
And when I first heard that quote as like an evangelical, I found it super threatening. It was like, why would you want to get rid of God? And like, why does God need to make us like larger and freer? I would have got the more loving part. And over the years, I'm like, dang, like, of course, like with most things, like Baldwin was right. And incredibly articulate ahead of a time that like any expression of God, any expression of religion that makes us smaller or the practitioners make other people smaller or less free or less loving, like that needs to be like purged out of the faith, like burn it up. Because I think Jesus wants all flesh to be larger, freer, and more loving. And so that became kind of a guiding light for the work. Like how about we reread the Gospels, the teaching of Jesus and all the kind of big themes.
Yep.
Be like, what does it look like to only commit to ways of reading that create larger, freer, more loving people and communities? So it's kind of like a guiding light for me in my faith at this point. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
That's great. I love that. So chapter 1, you dive in to the incarnation and geography of God.
Yeah.
And in particular, you start out with John chapter 1, the tabernacling of God as a model for all of God's presence in creation. Yeah. But you're particularly in each of your chapters, you're kind of critiquing some of the classical teaching of white Christianity.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And then you're kind of deconstructing it and then reconstructing a theology with voices from the margins, which was the voice of Jesus. Was a voice from the margin, right?
Yeah, we talk about a colonized person. Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So in the chapter on incarnation, I love Anna Case Winter's work, and you dove into her stuff. I loved it.
Yeah.
But you critique sort of the model of early Christianity. I mean, the early fathers grappled with the nature of Jesus and the nature of the Trinity, and it was all in substance language, right? Everything was. I heard this from somebody. Western Christianity has a substance addiction. As somebody in the recovery world, it resonates with me. But and that's such a tricky, deep topic for people who haven't dove into process theology. And why you have an issue with substance so much, But at any rate, give us you brought out 3 problems around this, some of the classic ideas about incarnation, and then you brought out some of Anna Case Winter's perspectives on kenotic, logos, spirit, cosmic. And you kind of introduced panentheism and panexperientialism all in that.
First, a lot going on in that chapter. I feel like you remember it better than me, Fred.
Well, I got notes that I just read it, so
Yeah.
But
I mean,
that's
yeah. So
a
that
lot of,
substance stuff, I feel like we could like geek out on that in a way that we'd probably like lose most
yeah, I
people on
know.
this call. But I would say to sort of like start simple, I feel like a lot of traditional Christianity asks us to gaslight our own experience. Like it basically says, buy this theory, and when your experience and the theory don't match, trust the theory. Your
Mm,
experience, just ignore it. And I was like, that's not like a tenable way to live, to like
mm,
gaslight your own experience. Like in the
mm,
end, like we can always be open that like I experience the world in my own little narrow perspective, and I'm probably wrong about a lot of things. I think that's healthy to be humble. But in the end, you got to be like, at some level, though, I got to trust my own experience, right? Like I just got to, and so some of this like kind of more nerded out language around like is the nature of experience and reality primarily about like the special substances created of, or is it more about the nature of our experience? Like there's some like kind of geeky philosophy and science behind all that. But I think in the end, there's an interest in the kind of theology that I know you and I, Fred, are both drawn to, this kind of open and relational theology. There's an interest in a theology that kind of aligns well with core common sense human experience. And some of this is born out of like 20th century philosophy and science of just kind of what we've learned about the nature of reality, that like everything, not just human experience, but even the experience of subatomic particles is super relational. It's
mm,
all about how it relates to other things.
mhm,
And everything's in a kind of constant state of change, not
mhm,
just like biological life through evolution, but kind of all material reality. Like our bodies aren't made of the same atoms they were made of like 10 minutes ago, let alone like 10 years ago. Like change is part of the life of all creation. Change of experience, at least, is part of the life of God. And so anyway, so some of our kind of old theological theories, they just don't make sense to us like quite in the same language that some of the founding fathers and mothers put them in. And like that's okay. Like religion can change too. We have our founding scriptures. We have our founding story of Jesus that doesn't change, but our kind of interpolation, our expression of our making meaning of those has always changed. And it's okay if that keeps changing. So some of the substance stuff,
mhm.
there's a bunch of that in the chapter, but I think that's more the kind of like nerd side of it, it's just kind of, but in the end, I think the heart of that is like it's okay if our religion keeps changing. We can like love, like we can have founding documents and a founding story that does not change. And then the kind of way we make meaning out of it, it's okay if that changes over time. Um, I think at heart, though, the less geeky part is like just taken seriously that God is really everywhere and with everyone. That God's not just on our side or in our place. And so I think the most interesting parts of that chapter to me are just really taking seriously the everywhereness of God, both in history and in our own lived experience and kind of where that drives us.
Yeah, I think that radical immanence of God,
Yeah.
and you can kind of almost see that as
Yeah.
its incarnational presence in all
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
everywhere at all time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not just
Yeah.
this one person that
Yeah.
ever was
Yeah.
incarnate, but that
Yeah.
in the sense of everything that, and it gets
Yeah.
into that panentheism. But then I like you brought out three repentances
Yeah.
that can emerge out of a new understanding of incarnation, a broader, more diverse understanding of incarnation. And you mentioned humans seeing themselves as a part of all creation, not above it. You mentioned the interconnections of all faith and humanity, not the exclusivity that we've fostered so many times. And then you talk about reparations, people, lands, and creation care. I love the practical working of that in a way that, hey, we need to rethink this. We need to repent and change some of our ways, because it can be anyway. Constructive.
No, thanks for seeing that, Fred. I feel like the goal of the scholarship in the book was to like take what at least I think are some kind of unarguable, like significant, like historical and theological scholarship, but to like maybe it's just my life as just like a pastor, right? To have those like expressed in very brass tacks, like down to earth contemporary life and spirituality. So it's like, it's one thing to say like, oh, the colonial ancestors who like came to the Western Hemisphere and were so incurious about like God was there before them. They weren't bringing God, right? Willie James Jennings, like a key scholar in that chapter, where he has this incredible book called like the Christian Imagination, I think it's called, like around the kind of colonists and their invention of the concept of race. Like they were so incurious, those ancestors, that like they thought they were bringing God, but God was there already. And so they made all this mistakes around, like Jennings coined that term, the geography of God. And like so much of their violence and exploitation was kind of born of this, just utter incuriosity of like the omniscience of God, that God is everywhere. It's one thing to be like, that happened historically. And like, what do you do with that? And I think it's easy to be like, I don't know, nothing. And it feels like too hard, too big. And it's like, for me, that really influences like how I relate to my Muslim, Jewish, secular neighbors. Like, I don't get to assume like I'm on God's team and they're not.
Yeah.
That utter arrogance and exclusivity is like, it's like, it doesn't look as bad if I do that as like, some Spanish dude in 1500, like stealing gold and like killing people. But it's the same spiritual impulse of like arrogance and utter incuriosity, right? Or when I don't like treat the earth right or participate in movements for environmental justice, same thing. It's like, I'm imagining that like somehow humans in our afterlife are sacred to God and we're going to be whisked off to some like outer space heaven somewhere. And actually be like, actually, like God's really interested in the life of this beautiful, special planet Earth, like all of it. And if I like, sorry, I keep getting a little salty in my language. What rating is this podcast, right? Like,
the F-bomb has been dropped on here before, so
if I like shit and piss all over the earth, that's like really how I want to say it.
Exactly.
So like that's like the real story. Then like I'm kind of like doing that to God. I'm doing that to sacred ground. Like I just feel like the repentance. I like reclaiming old religious words that have been weaponized. Like repentance just got to like, we need to change a story, a change of mindset. Like there's a different way. And that's true for religious people and it's true for non-religious corporations and stuff. Like I think the way of Jesus has so much guiding light power to be like better participants in the life of creation. And my dream is that chapter is like kind of fuel for that kind of exploration. So I thank you for seeing that, Fred. I appreciate that.
So chapter 2, the God Jesus called Abba.
Yeah.
Talk about, two pictures of God, one authoritarian God.
Yeah.
Dominant, controlling everything. And then there's this other vision of a nurturing, uncontrolling, loving God. Yeah. And I liked, you dove into kingdom, the message of the kingdom, which if you drop the G, we could talk about kingdom or kingdom, queendom, or the divine commonwealth.
Yeah.
John Cobb talks about. Community, as Martin Luther King talks about. You brought out 3 post-colonial images of God. One was there from 3 different.
I actually remember this chapter. I remember them.
Please. If you don't mind expounding on those 3, I thought those were really good.
I mean, I feel like in the end, if I have a scholarship gift, it is not originality. It's like it's my ADHD brain. It's a multiplicity. Like I just love like trying to get an imaginary group of people in a room and get them talking. So I'm like every one of these chapters, it's just like taking 15 people's brilliance and just imagine they're all hanging out having a conversation. And what is it? What's like something it says together? I think that's like all this book is doing.
I like that.
But like John Sanders, this great open theist who is like has that language on parenting research around authoritarian versus nurturing. He applies that to God, and there's a late famous kind of process theologian, this guy John Cobb, who had this beautiful book called The God Jesus Called Abba. Like, what did Jesus experience and his daddy, his papa, his father sense of God, and how is that not about maleness, right? It's a different. And then what are some different people that have kind of lived with and given different language for expressions of God with us and God's kind of kingdom with us that is really nurturing, is really positive. So it's just me getting all those people in a room having a conversation. But you want me to talk about those 3 or?
I like it because what's the 3 mile an hour God? And the parental of relational artistry that was good. I actually interviewed the pediatrician who had just done the book on parenting. He lives in Memphis, and
great book, Open and Relational Parenting. Chris Hansen.
Yes, Chris. Yes. But anyway, what is a 3 mile an hour God?
3 mile an hour God is this beautiful phrase from a Japanese theologian, Kosuke Koyami. And I kind of count him as a post-colonial theologian. I mean, Japanese were colonials too, but his writing, he was largely pushing back on like in the 70s and 80s, like the kind of like business-centered, like capitalist-centered Western culture. And so I feel like his work is resisting a modern trend in helpful ways. And his image of 3 Mile an Hour God is like this 3-page essay that I've read like a million times in a larger book that just speaks to my soul. I think about all the time. It's 3 mile an hour is the pace of walking. It's kind of like fast walk. People walk like 1 to 4 miles an hour. And it's like his whole point in the essay is like, he was writing in the 80s. He was like, what did he think of as fast? Xerox copiers, calculators, right? The world got a lot faster since then. But he was like, what if God's pace is walking speed? Because like, the Christian faith says that the deepest expression of God on earth we've ever seen is like God walking about in Palestine in the first century in the person of Jesus. And just like, never heard of a computer, never rode a car, just all of life was like barefoot in sandals, dirt roads, like slow. And so he's like the pace of God, like it's kind of like a riddle. How fast is God? And people think, oh, light speed, super light speed, infinite speed. And like, no, God's 3 miles an hour. God's slow. God moves at human walking speed. And I think Koyame says like also like the 3 mile an hour is the pace of God and it's the pace of love. And so God is a God that walks with us, like metaphorically and kind of literally. So actually like, yeah, God's not far off and God's pace is not faster than ours. The work of God is slow too, because God works within creation, not as like some magic outsider to it. Yeah. Yeah. It's really, I don't know. For me, it's like a really beautiful paradigm that I can't just define, but I feel like it grips my soul and takes me places.
Yeah. I hadn't stumbled across that before, so I liked it.
Yeah.
The other one that you mentioned is God as a Black woman.
Yeah. Yeah.
Expound that for us just a bit.
Yeah, Christina Cleveland's another person
I had
encountered as a mentor in this work, and she actually has this very provocative book called just God as a Black Woman that she published a few years ago, and she's been like both as a practitioner, as a pilgrim, and as a scholar, really interested in the Black Madonnas. And there's a really powerful Black scholar, a social psychologist and theologian who had a lot of experience in white evangelicalism and even in the Vineyard, a place we both have some roots. And it's just like, the Black Madonnas are these kind of black wood statues of Mother Mary, kind of found in different places throughout the world that are kind of sites of veneration and pilgrimage. She started visiting them because she was like, I need an expression of, again, might be my language, not hers, but the kind of nurturing relationship of God that is like for me. And not like some kind of like white male God, sky God. And not even, and also not like some Black mammy figure, like when white men try to think of God as a Black woman, like, and do it through a kind of white racialized experience of what white people want Black women to be for them. Like, not that either. Yeah. Not that either. But like a Black woman's experience of a Black woman. And I just think it's like, it's powerful work because I'm like, even for me as a white guy, like God as a distant, angry white man was like really, really tough for me. There was a way that shaped my faith a lot, even like in the image of my kind of like father figure types in my life, just kind of perfectionist, kind of always displeased with you, pretty aloof, high power, low social skill, kind of like the classic white male ancestor from the kind of like Protestant, Anglo, a lot of beautiful things in the culture I come from. But there's a kind of model of God, a model of kind of father figure type that's like very powerful, very perfectionistic, very strict, very aloof, low emotional EQ, and kind of imagining God's like that. And I just think, damn, that's like, it's toxic, it's violent, it's like unattuned, leaves me feeling kind of cold and unseen and unknown. And I'm like, no bueno. Like that is not a vibrant, nurturing spirituality. So I don't like particularly like for myself, like worship and think about God as a Black woman. That would be sort of like a weird, but I think Dr. Cleveland's work is a really powerful example of like, we need imagery for God that like busts out of some of those stuck, broken paradigms we've had for God. Yeah. And we can be super creative in the way we do it, which is why I try to sample a lot of people, because it's like freedom giving, like when I relate to like Mama God, that kind of can do some things for me that take me out of some boxes I used to have, take me out of some And I think, we can be really creative
Yeah.
in our experience of God, because Jesus was certainly creative in how he taught about Abba God. So like, why can't we
Yeah.
tap into something, again, more loving, larger, freer?
I love that.
Yeah.
It was interesting to me. I just had interviewed Paul Young just a few weeks ago, maybe 2 months ago.
Man, you're name dropping all these people I don't want to like cast shade on.
Right. Well, no, the funny thing was that, Paul, his book, The Shack, was banned. Southern Baptist banned it, Lifeway banned it, because he pictured God as a black woman.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then you had Cleveland, who was like going, yeah, but that was a black woman who was taking care of white people, and I mean,
listen, I'm not here to like make enemies or to insult the good work people are doing, like moving the faith forward. I got nothing to say about William Paul Young. I know his work has been transformative in many people's lives, but Dr. Cleveland would, I think, fairly point out, be like,
some of that,
actually, like, no, like, thank you, brother, but that's not good enough, because that's in the end kind of like appropriative and diminishing in its own way. And so anyway, I think I respect Dr. Cleveland's voice and work, and wanted to have her voice centered in this chapter, along with Karen Baker Fletcher and other, Monica Coleman, some black womanists who I think this kind of work on God, the nature of God, is very life-giving and refreshing and grounded. So
I love it. I love it.
For them.
I liked all of that. So anyway, Well, God,
I'm a peacemaker, man, not a fight picker. So I'll pick some fights in the book, and I'm going to tone it down in a podcast because
That's all right. It's all right. There's so much more ground to cover. I'm like going, I've still got a whole nother page full of notes, Steve. So.
It's a big book. I mean, it's not like that many pages, but it's 5 chapters, and each one's kind of its own little book because I needed to explore some ground, Yeah.
You end up a lot of work's been done around the cross and penal substitutionary atonement theories. And I've covered stuff from there as well. It's interesting. I was a big fan of Leon Morris and John Stott in my early evangelical years.
Yeah, I hear you.
And I remember reading Stott's book on the cross. And actually, even though I wouldn't agree with them all today, he was the first one that got me thinking about how what happens at the cross is all within the heart of God. Because he put a strong emphasis on it was God in Christ reconciling the world. And he was trying to, even Abraham Joshua Heschel in his book, The Prophets, and you referred to his chapter on pathos, which is
I love The Prophets.
One of my favorite chapters ever that he wrote on pathos. But he also has a chapter on wrath in that book. And I think if we think that there is injustice in the world,
absolutely,
I do think that a loving parent, like if one of your kids is hurting one of your other kids, there's something in a loving parent heart that responds to that hurt or injustice or harm. We could call that wrath, or we could call that something. And then, and you have to feel like if God's just not indifferent towards injustice, that there is some kind of pathos in the heart of God towards. It's still loving and reconciling, but it's also like a bit fierce.
Absolutely. I appreciate that tension you're drawing out. Find words like wrath. Again, I'm kind of a fan of like some folks in my congregation, like certain words are distracting for people, so I might rephrase. But I think the old religious words have a lot of power. They have a lot of baggage too. I got no problem. I actually really believe in the, for lack of a better word, like emotional life of God. Like actually, God is like responsive to creation, and God has an emotional life, and God experiences. I mean, how do I know what God experiences? But like something that would sound to us like a range of feelings, because you can't love without feeling.
Right.
And so like the idea of like God being offended, God being angry, like the way the Psalms talk about God is like smoke pouring out of God's nose as God streams down in wrath. Like I have room for that. Absolutely. I mean, as a trauma survivor, right? Like I want a God that cares. My beef with the kind of Calvinist substitutionary atonement there is not around like wrath or passion. It's around perfectionism. This idea that somehow God's got like this image of this kind of perfectionist set of standards that like some scholar or pastor out there, always a white guy, defines for you when they interpret the Bible. And if you miss it 0.00001% of the time, you need to be killed to satisfy the wrath of God.
Yeah, right.
Like, I just think that's crazy making abusive talk.
Yes.
I won't be subtle about that. I think that is like mainstream in certain parts of the Christian church. And I just think it's like super offensive to God. It's like, doesn't make God look like reasonable, beautiful, or good in any way. And so I think like, just that's kind of, I mean, I'm working a beef against that in that chapter, like you said, as many others have in our time. It's a problem that's being corrected a lot. But I got no issue with like the emotional intensity of the life of God.
Yeah. The idea that God has to kill somebody to forgive somebody.
Yeah.
It's just bizarre.
Yeah. And like in the end, I sort of spent a lot of time thinking about what's the nature of power in that chapter. It's kind of the direction I go in, that like in the end, power isn't like a perfectionist who uses violence to get their way. Power is like the ability to be so loving and so persuasive that like you work with others to kind of move somewhere good together.
We're running out of time, but chapter 4, you kind of dove into, rather than just the, Billy Graham gospel of, give your life to Jesus and escape this world and go to heaven. You really tried to dig into Luke, Mark, and Matthew and give some broader, beautiful visions of what wholeness and salvation, shalom looks like through the lens of the 3 synoptic gospels. I love that. But this chapter 6 on resurrection, I found so fascinating. Because when it comes to ORT and our attempts to integrate the best of science and the best of philosophy with what do we mean by resurrection hope? You brought out Vermes and N.T. Wright, and then you talked about objective immortality, subjective immortality, and again pan-experientialism. I found that I still feel like I don't even know what to think about all that sometimes. As much as I have thought about it. And I appreciated the way you broke it down with some of the open relational process people believe in objective immortality, which means that we're contained in the experience and the heart and memory of God. But some of the open relational people like Hartson really push back on the idea that we'll have any kind of ego or self-consciousness. Right. Whereas there's some people like David Ray Griffin who still do argue for what he would call, or you would call, subjective immortality, where there is some ongoing aspect of our consciousness and personality contained within the heart and experience of God everywhere. Well, I'm curious, as a pastor, like when you do funerals, get real practical, because isn't it challenging? No,
you're on point. I mean, I tell a story of that. Just for the record, we're going to skip over chapter 4, the one on different kinds of salvation. I think that's my favorite in the book.
Okay.
So I would actually say if anyone reads it and they get bogged down in some of the technicalities in chapter 1 and 3, just skip it and read chapter 4 on what is Jesus' vision of salvation and what are some different ways that can look. That's actually my favorite chapter. I think it's super cool. I'm proud of it. But I wrote the one on resurrection that you're talking about. I wrote this whole book for me first and for my descendants, and I hope it'll be helpful. But I especially wrote this chapter for me because I tell a story in there that that same year, 2021, doing a funeral for this really beloved participant in our church. And most of the audience in the kind of room at the funeral were not churchgoers, and being kind of filled with questions and doubt myself in the room. And there's a Beatles quote that was part of that funeral, just asking, what does it mean to hope that love never dies? And how that those lyrics actually kind of carried me. They gave me a way into my doubt and a way through it to some degree. But I kind of acknowledge more openly than I usually do as a local pastor my own experience of coming in and out of confidence and doubt when it comes to resurrection and the afterlife. Because I think, again, if you want a faith that doesn't gaslight your experience, if you're it honors your lived experience. We don't have a lot of lived experience in this life about embodied post-mortem reality. None of us walk around and get to interact with some kind of being that was once dead and is now still in a body and alive again. So just like what can our hope in a resurrection look like? So in a lot of ways, like I try to map the terrain in that chapter. Just say, here are some options.
Yeah.
That science embracing smart theologians, and here's, I intentionally critique a famous liberal and a famous evangelical and just kind of poke holes, be like, I don't know, like they both have some blind spots. That's kind of that's like the nerdy part of the chapter. And then I try to map the terrain of like, here's some different ways to have a kind of robust hope in the afterlife. Mm-hmm. And I kind of don't know who's right, because who knows when it comes to the afterlife, nobody knows anything. We're all like guessing. We're all hoping. We're all practicing a kind of informed faith that we don't ultimately know. And so I map the terrain partly to be helpful to myself, to be like, well, some days I don't know if me or other people I love get to have like an embodied subjective experience in the afterlife. I kind of hope for that. And I in the end in the chapter say, I think there's reasonable possibility we can hope in that, the more kind of traditional Christian hope. But I was like, even if all it is that like my memory and experience is carried in the life of God forever, I'm like, that's actually still pretty meaningful. Love, so I just try to map the terrain. There's different ways we can believe in resurrection and afterlife that can be hope-filling. And then more importantly in that chapter, the kind of contribution of the justice-oriented liberations, be like, I think the main point of resurrection faith for us is to be people of be like life givers, not life stealers in this life. Like to like really marshal all our energy for a more abundant life kind of world in the present. Like, because we don't have to be agnostic about that. We totally get that, what it means to be like death dealing or life giving. Yeah. So I kind of channel a lot of energy there in the end. But yeah, I wrote that chapter first to kind of like wrestle with some of my own questions about the afterlife and resurrection.
Well, I loved it. Good job. I think even when I was just preaching this past Easter, if you look at just the history of anthropology, every civilization that we have history of had some form of, you could call it ancestor respect or ancestor worship. Yeah. You think about Hebrews chapter 12, therefore, since we have this great cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us run with endurance, Yeah. And if you go back and reread the resurrection encounters, there's as much doubt that they had. That's right. As there is. That's right. As there is people who kind of. But and so if you read it, it's they're very mystical in their encounters. Yeah. The gospel writers were not, if they wanted to like really just like make the strongest case possible that like Jesus rose from the dead and we saw him in the body, like they got real weird about it. Like they complicated their own case. They're really beautifully strange and mystical and kind of hard to pin down. The resurrection accounts. Like I get what you're saying. Yeah. And then, John Dominic Crossan, has made this huge thing about the difference between Western resurrection with just Jesus, a solo flight up into heaven, versus Eastern views of resurrection, which was the whole community is raised together. Yeah. And so I think that as we live the spirit of Jesus in communities of human flourishing, if you will, I mean, from an evolutionary standpoint, all species, not just humans, but all species thrive better together. Yeah, amen. It's not just survival of the fittest, it's survival of the friendliest, right? And and we need that. We need each other to thrive and survive. And the message and heart of Jesus living in these resurrected communities that you're describing that are more free and loving and kind and beautiful and it could save the planet if we would get serious about this stuff. Like, I mean, or like save us. The planet will abide. It's our species that's in question. I know. You know what I mean? And some other species. We're doing a good job taking others out with us. But planet's going to make it. The question is like, will we, Yeah. It is. Or how long we got left. Yeah. And your conclusion centered around that. That's right. Good transition. Facing apocalypse. Your conclusion with Kathleen Keller's reflections on the apocalypse, I thought were a beautiful way to wrap the whole thing up, right?
Yeah, because broadly saying like we live in nothing but apocalyptic times, right? If we take that like symbolically, like the end of the world as we know it, right? So it's just like we live in very disruptive times, and we need a good news of Jesus that can be of some help and some life. So yeah, we got a lot of troubles in the world. A lot of trouble.
I enjoyed reading this, and wow, it was like you tackled a lot, but I love the heart of it, and I love your heart. Thank you for sharing and being on the podcast.
No, thanks for having me, Fred. It's fun to talk.
And just tell people again your church website,
sure.
Also how they can find the book, all that stuff.
Yeah. My main life, my day job, I'm a senior pastor here at Reservoir Church, and we're a really fabulous kind of multiracial, dynamic, vibrant post-evangelical church here in Cambridge, and we're on YouTube too. And then the book, all new authors. I'm not a big fan of the corporation, but buying our stuff on Amazon is actually the most effective way in our capitalist economy for the books to get attention. And so you can get All Flesh Shalom there. Look up my name of the book on Kindle or in paperback. It's just out like a couple weeks ago, and it's doing okay. It's like ranking in some categories. So hopefully some of your listeners can add to the fun there. And I've got a Substack with the same title, All Flesh Shalom, where I just kind of keep exploring these themes, let people be in a conversation about it.
Cool. Yeah. For those who are viewing it on YouTube, here's I'm putting up the copy. So thanks so much, Steve. It was great. I look forward to seeing you in Kansas City in 6 months or so, or 5 months or something like that. So
look forward to being there. Go KC.
All right.
And thanks for having me on the podcast. Really, really rewarding to be in the conversation and to hear about your insights and interests. Appreciate it, Fred.
Yeah, well, take care, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Hey, you made it to the end. Thanks for listening all the way through on this episode. By the way, if you're not already a supporter, go to spiritualityadventures.com, sign up for one of our monthly supports, and you will receive our bonus content. You'll receive lots of interesting information about our guests. Many of our musicians will do special bonus songs and record a song. So I want to encourage you to do that. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Be sure and subscribe. Be sure and share any of the episodes that you like. And be sure and make comments if you like them as well. This helps us get Spirituality Adventures out there to more listeners, more watchers. So whatever platform you're using, subscribe, like, share, make comments, and go to our website, sign up for our team, and be a part of the team support. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.